12 years ago, I kind of accidentally started publishing board games, and our very first thing which we did was actually inspired by a computer game, a video game, and that was Civilization from Sid Meier. This is the game which we were kind of developing, and it was before we founded CGE. I'm sorry for those who cannot read Czech, because it's only in Czech, because at that time we worked on the prototype only in Czech language, and after that we translated it into English. But the designer of this board game, he for several years tried to find publishers in Germany, in US, which will be interested in publishing his games, but because he was somebody unknown from Eastern Europe, no one wanted to publish his board games. And when we played this game for the very first time, we felt like it would be a really, really big shame to not publish this board game, because we felt like, okay, this is one of the best board games we ever played. So we decided that we will kind of help him to publish it, but in a way that we will make it as far as we could, bring it to German city Essen, where every year in October is the biggest board game convention called Spiel, which is game in German, and try to sell it there, the copies which we'll bring there, and also find a real publisher who will take it, further develop it, and then make it as a proper board game. So we did that. We rented the smallest booth which was possible, which was 2 times 5 meters, and we brought those boxes there and tried to sell them. And we were kind of successful with it. We sold all of them. And second day, we already had that publisher we were looking for. And this is how our version of the board game looked like, the box. And we were kind of surprised that that publisher took that game, really upgraded the box to make it nicer, more visually appealing. But that was our final product, which we brought to Essen and sold to people. But there was not that much better than ours. Yes, there were rounded corners on cards and things like that. But other than that, it really was not better. Definitely it was not more developed, because everything on the cards stayed same. Even our illustrations, which we felt like that they are not as good as they could, they stayed there. So then we were thinking, okay, if this was good enough, then maybe we can do this on our own, because we really liked the process of developing board games. And because of that, we founded Czech Games Edition. I quitted my previous job and started working full-time on making board games. Our first board game, which we made under this brand, was Galaxy Tracker, where you are flying in space. At first, you are building a spaceship from tiles, and then you are flying it with it through the space and encounter some things. And that was kind of interesting, because there are a lot of cardboard components from which you were building the ship. It had a lot of cards which represented those kind of encounters you can meet during your flight. A lot of plastic components. By the way, they are all made here in Czech Republic, not in China, which is kind of unique. We had also wooden cubes, also made in Czech Republic, and even glass pieces. which were used to sign if some battery is energized or not. And I felt like, okay, we have everything. And then we came with this game, and there were CD. And I want to speak about this game a bit more because that CD there was really important for the gameplay. This game is cooperative, which means that all players are playing together against the game and try to win. Problem with these games is usually that one player who really knows the game significantly better than others, which is usually the guy or, who has the game and try to play with his friends, he knows the game better, and in those cooperative games he tells others that, okay, you should do this, you should do this, you should do this. In board gaming world, we kind of speak about this as kind of alpha gamer problem. That gamer kind of tells others what they should do, and sometimes those other players just feel like they are just holding the cards or some other pieces and then just doing what that alpha player is telling them to do. So for them it's usually not much fun. But in this game there is one really crucial component which kind of fixed that problem, and that is time limit. Because on that CD, there is a track which you will start playing when you will start playing the board game, and that track will limit how much time you have to actually do this game, and one player is unable to completely foresee everything and tell everyone to do something. Yes, it is possible to say to somebody, please take care of this, but he cannot tell, okay, put this card here, put this card here, because there is no enough time for that. But we needed to have these audio tracks to limit this, but on these audio tracks there were also things like, okay, in time t+5 there will be enemy on the right side of the ship. Or in time t+3 there will be some enemy boarding your ship. And when you will hear that from the soundtrack, you will draw a card, put it on the table and deal with what is on the card. And you know from the soundtrack when it appeared. Okay? And nowadays we would just make an app for that, because it kind of, everyone now has a phone which is able to play audio, and this can be completely randomized and everything. But we published it in 2008, and at that time it was not possible. There was no app store for iOS. There was no Android available as it is now. Most people did not have with them device to play even MP3s. So we really had to make audio CDs. There were actually 2 of them in the game. On each there were 8 different tracks. One was used for kind of tutorial, introduction to the game, and the second was with full missions. We are considering now that we will make this game kind of, we will redo some graphics in this game and make proper apps for it and re-release it. We are still selling it, it's still selling well, but we would like to update it to current time. But by the way, there were some fans which actually, and they did an apps for this board game. So if you will look for Space Alert, you will find some apps which can generate those soundtracks on the fly. Here is Space Alert. It was really in the TV show, and it was kind of really accidental for us, because our US partner at that time, he decided at some point that he will kind of invest into advertisement, and he will kind of pay back what he earned, that he will kind of support art in US, so he really gave a lot of money into advertisement and gave a lot of games, and his goal was to introduce his games, which he was selling, into different shows, into different movies, and so on. And that was the end. And by the way, it's also sitting here. And this was not in the show, but the actor, this actor, he is really a big board game fan, so he sent us this picture. When I spoke about Through the Ages, that it has some inspiration from digital games, this game also gets inspiration from one quite old but really known video game. Do you have any guess which one it could be? Yeah, Dungeon Keeper. And basically you are doing exactly what you were doing in Dungeon Keeper, but in board game. You are building your dungeon, you are hiring monsters, you are mining gold, and so on. And you try to protect this from those heroes who try to go there and destroy everything for you. And it was really, really good. For us, it was kind of a milestone because for the very first time we found illustrator outside from Czech Republic, because we found somebody in France and we felt like he is the perfect fit for this game. And I believe that this character is really, really nice. We also came later with a game which really kind of requires to have a digital app. In this case, it's Alchemists, and you are using this app in this way that here you have cards, 2 cards, and you are using app on your phone that you will scan which cards you have here. You will scan it, and when you scan it, the app will tell you what potion you made out of those 2 ingredients. And during the whole game, those 2 ingredients will always create that one specific potion. But in different game, they will do something different. So it's the phone acts as some kind of randomizer. So instead of having some game master in game who will know how the alchemy in this one game will work, and every game it should be different, you have an app. And you can play it with it, and it was really it, and still kind of unique game, because many board gamers, they are very, very conservative, I have to say. And when we announced this, we heard and saw a lot of comments like, okay, but if I will buy this game and in 10 years there will be no app for that, we will be not able to play it, and so on. And they were really afraid that it's just a gimmick or whatever. But in the end, the vast majority of board gamers and those core board gamers, they agreed that it really adds something to the game. But I would like to go back to that first game which we did even before we did Through the Ages, because something like three years ago, we finally did what we wanted, that some publisher we were going for would actually make. So this is the new box of Through the Ages, that civilization type of game, and this is the new look of it. If you compare it to the previous one, it's definitely kind of upgrade, I believe. So we did this one, but we did one more game till now, which is kind of heavily inspired by video games, and that is Adrenaline. It's kind of first-person shooter as a board game. Usually, because there exist games like Doom, you can find it and buy it and play it. But what they do normally is that you will decide, okay, I will try to shoot at this target, then you will take dice, roll with them, and you will see what happens. And that is some kind of interaction we do not like. the interaction with or work with luck in a way that you make decision, then you will roll with dice. So there is some luck element, and after that you will see the result. What we really like more is to have a randomness, some random thing at the beginning, then based on what is the output of that randomness, we will make some decision as a players, and that will generate the outcome. That is what we really prefer about how to work with randomness. So in this game, there are no dice at all. Instead, you are running around, shooting at each other. You are marking how much damage who gave you, and so on. And when somebody dies, this is evaluated based on who did the most damage, will get the most points, and so on and so on. And then we did this game. Do you know this game? Yeah. Who does? Okay, that's good. This game was kind of really a breaking point for us because till now, we focused all our games to gamers. Even with this game, we designed it for gamers, for those people who has something like 50, 100 games in their collection or even more, and they can play it. But this game is kind of special that it works even for non-gamers. We know about a lot of people who play it with their grandparents and have really good time with it. And in the end, we made this game till now in 40 different languages. This is from Philippine language edition. And we did over 4 million copies already of this game. By the way, I was kind of looking in the past which game was selling that fast at the beginning, and I found only one game which was, and that is Ludo. All newer games, even Monopoly, were selling slower at the beginning. It looks like this. This is kind of this is kind of old slide. Now we have 14 languages. This is something like 1 year old slide. And the important thing is that it won Spiel des Jahres. It's German award, and it's basically the biggest award which any board game can win. Just to give you an impression, a regular print run on German market for game is around 3,000 copies for German market in German language. When some game is nominated for this prize, then usually publisher prints something like 30,000 copies, just immediately after they will receive the nomination. And the game which will win, after that they usually print around 300,000. So difference is really, really big to win this. And I know about a lot of publishers who really focus to get this prize. And they are trying to publish games which will be suitable to get this prize. I have to say, I did not believed in the past that we could ever have win this prize, because most of our games are too heavy for this prize. Because this prize is given only to games which really works with families. But besides that, we were kind of geeks and computer geeks, because I formerly was a programmer. Vlaada, the designer of those most popular games from us, even the first one Through the Ages and so on, he was video game designer, he was also a programmer. So when we were developing some game, we used some online system in which we play tested the board game. This is kind of really unusual in board games, because most people who do board games, they are not programmers. So what they do is always print new version, play it on the table. Then if something is not correct, they will rewrite it on the paper or print new version and so on. And that process is really, really slow. And also you do not have real data from test sessions because your friends are playing it somewhere, and then they will come to you and say, I think that this card is probably too strong. But you have only their feeling, and you do not have any data to validate this. So we have it implemented here. By the way, it was implemented in Java. And we played tons of sessions here. And we had a lot of data, and because of that, we were able to balance different fractions in a way that they will be really worthy to play against. And for us, was kind of big change when this device appeared. Funny thing is that at that time, I was kind of anti-Apple, completely anti-Apple, and as you can see, I'm not anymore. But I was, at that time, in US on one board gaming event, which was for something like 10 days, when this device was started selling in US. And a lot of people there, from something like 300 people, 30 people bought this. And when I tried it there, I immediately went to the shop, to Apple Store, and bought it also. And we were thinking about making some game for it because it felt like really good platform for it. Because you can do everything with your finger very easily. It's big enough to show everything what is necessary. And we felt like this game, our first real game, which we developed as CGE, will be really suitable because in this game you have those. This place where you build your spaceship, you take those tiles, you flip them, and try to build a spaceship out of them here. And that is really, really kind of suitable for tablet because you will just drag those tiles over your ship and everything. Then when you have the ship, you will fly with it through those encounters. So we made, this is from the development, this is not completely final version. And as you can see, you have tiles here, some of them are already flipped, some not, and you are building your ship here. Pretty easy, pretty straightforward. Here, the flying part, it's more different than in board game, but when you know the board game, it's a really good representation of that. Because in board game, you have just some tokens instead of whole ships on some path. Here, we could have afford to place whole ships. And here, if you have some encounter, some special thing will appear, and you will do whatever. In this case, you can load some cargo. Here you can see what you can load, and here you can see where you can load it. But problem with board games, at least from the perspective of digital games, is that it is multiplayer, always. You nearly never play board game on your own, but you play with other people, like here. And so that was kind of necessary to implement multiplayer for board games. But I don't know if you tried to play some board game online, but board gamers are kind of really picky that everything needs to work really well for them, because otherwise they would not be interested in playing it. And so we developed, at first we developed AI, different levels of AI, and you can play multiplayer, you can add their AI, and so on. We invented even a new variant of the game, which was not in the original board game itself. That was building using some action points and things like that. We had to do typical things like profiles and everything for it. But we developed something more, something which was not in the board game itself, and that is this campaign, where you started here, nearly without any money, because this game is about acquiring money by flying through the space, and you were able to fly only with the smallest ship here on those paths. So there is really big campaign where you earn money, unlock new ships, and all things like that. And for that, we needed to invent new things which were not in the board game, like here, explosive cargo. We needed to make this board game work for board gamers, but also we wanted to have it also for working for people who do not know this board game, because there are tons of other people who do not know this board game, and this is kind of important to tap also in that, because just from board gamers we felt that we cannot support the development of those things. But I have to say, despite the fact that Vlaada, the designer of the board game, was originally in video game industry, I was a programmer, we were kind of naive how much work it is. First thing, we felt like, okay, we have board game, we have a lot of graphic assets, we have everything, but we found that, that was our first game, we were not good at it at the time when we developed the board game, so we decided, okay, for this video game version of this board game, we need to make it nicer. So this is original card from board game, and this is the variant, exactly the same card in a digital variant of the game, same this to this, and so on. We had to make this cockpit, which works as a menu and other things. But in the end, it was worth. I have to say that we originally thought that we will make it in something like 1.5 years. We spent over 3 years on it. But on the other hand, we felt like at the beginning that we will be able to sell something like 20 to 30,000 copies. And in the end, we are now over 150,000. And it's premium app, it's not free to play. And responses for that game they are really positive on both iOS and Android. And by the way, this is kind of fun thing. When we were developing it, I was on one gaming convention, and we had this big Dell tablet where it was possible to play it. And this guy, he has tattooed Galaxy Tracker on his arm, because he really loved the board game that much, which is kind of crazy for me, but why not? So, I would like to go back to Through the Ages again, because this game is kind of really important for us, because we decided that since this game is so popular in between really heavy board gamers, if you will go to Board Game Geek, which is kind of the biggest site for board games on the web, and you will look at their top 10, Through the Ages is currently number 3. And they have in their database something like 80,000 different games. So there are a lot of games. But the problem with this game is that it has a lot of components, a lot of things, and we need to fit it on small iPad or even the phone. So it was really, really not that easy. But we had really one big advantage, that when we were doing this new version of Through the Ages, we already knew about iPad, because at that time we already kind of were developing the Galaxy Tracker. So when we were drawing things for this version, we were also doing all the graphic assets, or not all, but many graphic assets, in a way that they will be usable for both board game version and digital version of the game. And in the end, the digital version looked like this. So if you, for example, look here, and you will look here, there are here riflemen. Those units, the same units can be here shown, like on the card. And same applies for all type of buildings, wonders which you can build. All of them show here, but without the cards. You can tap on them and they will reveal as the cards, like they are here. But when you have them in your civilization, they are not shown as the cards. And reception for that is really good, again. By the way, those screenshots, I took them today, so they are really, really current. And when I was saying that the Through the Ages, the original, this board game, inspiration for that came from video game. It was from this original Sid Meier's Civilization. But I don't know if you know this, but inspiration for Sid Meier's Civilization was this, and that is board game. Okay? So, Francis... I don't know about that. So that kind of blows me away that one guy in 60s developed this board game, made it, that inspired Sid Meier to make Civilization, and actually Microprose licensed the name from Avalon Hill, from Avalon Hill, from the publisher of the board game, that they can use it. Okay, and that inspired Vlaada to make board game out of it, and then we made it also to digital again. But by the way, if you would be interested, there also exists official Sid Meier's Civilization, the board game, which is very, very different from the Through the Ages which we published. Because Through the Ages, although it's civilization game, it is without map, completely without map. But Sid Meier's Civilization really heavily depends on the map. So they are very, very different. One important thing I would like to say about this right now is that we are working for expansion for this board game. I don't know if you know expansions for board game, but it's basically something like DLC for video games. But you have to go to shop and buy it. You cannot download it. But we are developing it now in the app. We have it implemented for something like 70–80% of it now, and we are playtesting it. And when we will finish it, we will also release it as an expansion for board game. But it will be done in digital game. So it's really intermixed. And last thing which I can say is that now we are working on another game which is inspired by video games, and this time it's inspired by isometric dungeon crawler games. So if you remember really big brand, that's correct. You are going, slashing tons of monsters, you will get loot out of them, and you will enhance your character, and so on. There is some skill tree and things like that. And that game we target to publish next year. But again, like in previous, it's just an inspiration, something like, okay, if you know these video games from the past, when you will play this, you will have those positive feelings because you playing board game variant of that, but it will not be really based on that it would require license. We are not doing licensed versions of games because it's kind of too limiting for us. And that's everything from me. So Any questions?
Yeah, let's open it up to questions. I'm going to come round with the mic. If you could just make sure that you say your question into the mic so that we pick it up for the video. So who's got a question?
Will the dungeon crawling game include secrets?
Includes?
Secrets. Like secret rooms and stuff like that.
No, because problem is that when you are doing board game version of nearly anything, you need to have some levels of abstraction. And in this one, the abstraction is that you are actually not moving really into some dungeon, going over the space. It's like in 3 Ages, we do not have map. Here, we do not have really place where you will go around and try to find something, but it's more about those other things. So, sorry, no secret places.
Any other questions? Okay.
Do you find there's a perfect balance of a correlation between planning and prototyping in terms of balance, especially in competitive board games?
Planning and prototyping?
Yeah, like you test, you try, you come up with some ideas, but you don't know how balanced they are until you literally play with somebody to try and test it. Like how often, what is the iteration of the process, and how often do you change between planning and prototyping?
The process is very, very different for every single game. And the reason is that sometimes when designer comes, the game is as good that we do not need to change any core game mechanics. Sometimes designer comes with really, really cool idea, but the core mechanics during the development, they change a lot. And if this happens, then any balancing you had before changing of that core mechanics is totally useless. So the balancing is actually the thing which we do kind of very last. Yes, of course, during the development of the game, as we are playing it again and again, and with other people we are playing it again and again, we want to have it balanced as much as possible, because then it's enjoyable for everyone to play for all different fractions. But to make final balancing, we really focus on that in the last stage of development, when we know that we will not change the core mechanics anymore.
Thank you.
Thanks. So I've seen that you basically only showed one game that incorporates in one game, in one concept, it incorporates an app combined with a board game on the table, with a physical board game. So are you planning any more of these concepts? And if not, then why? Do you think that like this is not the future, that it's better to iterate between like electronic versions and physical versions? Or what's your thoughts on that?
There are several things around that. What we plan to do is definitely to make Space Alert with an app instead of CDs, and it will bring more variety to the game. So we will do something like that definitely in the close future, I would say. But releasing completely new game which will depend on an app, that is something a lot of people and a lot of designers are trying to do, but it's not that easy to do it in a way that it will be really worthwhile to do it. Okay? I know that Vlaada, the designer of 3 Ages and Codenames and Galaxy Tracker, he has a lot of ideas about this, because he came from video game space, and he still plays a lot of video games. And he were actually developing some game which was really even more heavily dependent on an app than his previous games. But he's stuck now at some point of development that he do not know how to overcome it for now. I hope, because I really like the concept of the game, that he will resolve it at some point and we can make it in the future. But it's not sure. And there are some other publishers tried to do similar thing, but most of them, they are just gimmicks. They are just things you can easily replicate without any app. They just want it to be cool and to be on some wave of combining things together. But to make it really, really working together, it's really hard. And it needs to be interconnected together. And there are very few designers who are able to look at those things from both sides and imagine what is possible to do with an app.
Thanks.
Do you have that original Civilization board game?
No.
Oh.
No, sorry. And I know that it is not a game in which I would be interested. One of the things I do not personally like in board games, and if you will look at our games which we published, you can see that it's not there, or if yes, it's very, very limited, is direct interactions between players. Because, and what is direct interactions between players? It is like, okay, we have this map, I'm here, you are here, and there are maybe 4 players, and then I can go to you and start and attack you, okay? And in most games, this is kind of thing which weaken both of us, and somebody else will profit out of it. And if I will not attack you, but I will attack him, I am making decision if you will be weaker or he will be weaker, okay? And in most of these games, if you are trying to play them really, really well, there is kind of meta game above the board game where you try to convince others, okay, but I'm so weak, he's stronger, you should attack him because otherwise he will win. But problem for me is that this meta game is exactly the same in all those games, which has a lot of board interaction between players. And it's kind of boring for me. Yeah? And you know, and to some extremes, because I'm kind of good board game player, and many of my friends know this. When we play a game like this one, they say, okay, we should attack him because he is a good player. And then it's again not much fun for me because, you know, they decided that I cannot win. Yes, sometimes I do, and then I'm really happy. But other than that, you know, I rather prefer games where you say, okay, now this catastrophe will happen. Everybody knows that this catastrophe could happen, and everybody can kind of prepare for it. And it's their responsibility to prepare for it. Yes, this catastrophe now affects this player more than this player, but everyone was able to kind of prepare for it, especially when they will see I am also preparing against this catastrophe. So they may think, okay, he's really preparing for that. He might have it on his hand and he will play it in the future. So I will rather prepare for it also. Okay? So this is interaction between players, and that is what I really look forward to. And this original Civilization is kind of full of direct interaction.
Okay, thank you very much. We've got time for one final question, if there is one. No? Okay. Well, oh, sorry, I didn't see you there.
Thanks. Just one more point. You said that you now started basically to prototype your board games in electronic environment, mostly.
Actually, I have to say that in the past, most of games from Vlaada were actually first in digital form, at least somehow, and only after he was sure that it's working, he made really paper prototype.
So, do you think that like paper prototypes are in any capacity needed anymore?
They are needed. They are needed, and for very, very strong reason. Because when you have a digital prototype, a lot of things feel very, very differently than on the board. Many things which are really fiddly on the board, and you have moved this, that, they are done kind of automatically in digital environment. So you really need to have this paper, pen and paper form of the board game to really see how it goes. And also, what is really needed is to playtest it with completely new players who do not know the board game yet, to see how they react to the game. So yeah, that is definitely necessary. Maybe they are really necessary from some stage, and until that stage, it's completely okay to work with digital game. But yes, we are doing the expansion for 3 ages in digital. That's true, but that's because we know that on the board it's already working. It's existing game. It's just expansion, which will add new cards and other things. But even those, from time to time, we playtest them on the board, because some things could be really good in digital, and some things could be really messy. You constantly forget to move this token there and things like that. So yeah, it's definitely important.
Okay, thank you.
All right, great stuff. Fantastic talk. I enjoyed it tremendously. Let's put our hands together and say thanks to Peter for a great talk.
You're welcome.